Disclaimer.
Yeah, this is a disclaimer. This episode is not your normal episode. This is very tough and gonna be hard to watch. So this episode includes everything from child trafficking, sex trafficking, human trafficking, trafficking as a whole, gore, violence, shit you should not watch around kids, shit I shouldn't have listened to begin with because now I'm scarred for life.
Natalie's an
I don't know how she
activist
does it.
fighting for people's rights.
Yeah.
What she does is really amazing. Please check out this episode.
It's crazy, yeah. And also, if you aren't into this kind of stuff, it's totally flat. It's totally fine. Click off. See you next episode. Enjoy. Tune in. Peace. Just like that, another day, another episode
362 of A to the Show.
Right.
Wow, traveling the world. We're in Texas now with Natalie Denise.
That's right.
Gonna let the world know who you are and what you do.
Sure, yeah. Name is Natalie Denise, and that name is not a mistake, although it was a mistake on my birth certificate. Many people do wonder about my name. It's supposed to be Natalie, but I always throw that fun story out about my name because it's kind of unique. But as far as me, I am really just a social media influencer. Mm-hmm. With a background in sex trafficking intervention, anti-trafficking, combating that industry, volunteership, and I'm just a patriot that loves my country, and I see things going hand in hand with my purpose, and unfortunately it's increasing, which makes my job that much more busier as a knowledge giver for the public audience. But but my main bread and butter is political commentary on YouTube. I did step away from a corporate job to do this. So my past is also in data analytics, which is, a completely different shift.
Completely different life. Yeah.
Busy life.
Yep.
Before we get into the hard stuff, we give you another disclaimer. This is going to be a really tough episode to watch for some of you. So if it is that case, be free to click off. We'll see you next episode. But before we get into the hard stuff, what do you mean by mistaking your birth certificate? Like, how does that work? I thought the one document parents should not fuck up is a birth certificate, right? So how what's the situation there?
Well, it wasn't my parents. They actually did the right thing. It was whoever typed up the birth certificate.
Oh, of course.
They forgot the A. So, but it works in my favor because it's a unique name, right? So I'm easy to find on the internet.
Because in Arabia, we have by nomenclature, I don't know how to say the word, two first names as well, right? Some people do have two first names, which is normal. But there, I thought you guys had like first, middle, last name, which is pretty...
Right. We do. So my middle name is actually Denise,
right.
Natalie Denise. Yeah, first Natalie Denise, and I'm first and middle. But yeah, I guess it works out the same here in the States.
Right. I guess right. Into the deep and hard questions then.
Deep. I really care about what you're doing. Thank you so much, Natalie, first off, for what you do. The advocacy you do, the videos you do, the podcasts you do. I think it's really important to discuss these topics because a lot of people aren't discussing these topics.
Or know about this topic at all, right? Like, I'll be very honest.
Topic about
I learned about this whole like sex trafficking and child trafficking when I heard about Jeffrey Epstein, which was not that long ago. If you think about it, right? I never knew this is a thing, right? Until like 2 or 3 years ago, which is very like it was just it's crazy, right? So for those who don't really know what it is, what is trafficking as a whole?
Yeah, trafficking is the force or the tricking of it's a force of fraud or coercion of a person to perform a laborious or sexual act. Mm-hmm. It is enslavement and it is extortion. So, there are many forms of we'll just generalize it as human trafficking, human trafficking, because it's so broad. There's many factions. Really, it's between, sexual servitude and laborious servitude they go hand in hand. But of course, there can be a distinction where someone gets entrapped in a laborious servitude, where they're working the fields, or they're domestic servants, without pay, or they're kept. I've seen stories where they're kept in stores and working as store clerks, as enslaved store clerks. So, those are the. I don't know that they're so much rare. We just don't hear about it so much. Those type of sex trafficking stories, but more so the industry that is just booming is sex slavery, sex trafficking. Unfortunately, we are living through a timeline that is just so pervasive and sick that it is now even it's affecting children, and at a wide scale. And I've been seeing this with my very eyes. As you guys may know, me being in Texas and close to the border, I have had the opportunity to visit the border many a times. And unfortunately, this is happening a lot.
Right. So my first question is, what's the difference between human trafficking, and enslavement, or turning someone into a slave, per se?
It goes hand in hand. So human trafficking is the enslavement. It's like, you think of it as enslavement and entrapment. Human trafficking is the act. And so, like I said, it can be various ways you could do it. It could be that you're enslaved to perform a task, or enslaved to perform a sexual transaction. But human trafficking is the act. Enslavement is the act of holding somebody against their will. So, again, for example, the children is a big example. They have no voice, they have no power to get out, or whatever situation that's created for them. So unfortunately, and of course this happens to adults. I always focus on the children because they have no voice, they have no fight in this industry, and unfortunately it's almost a near impossible unless somebody is investigating and finding out where they are to rescue and recover them. So enslavement is of course it's the act, it's within the act of being enslaved, whether it's labor or sexual servitude, versus human trafficking. It's that is the act of actually enslaving the person, and it involves another person doing it to another person.
I see. I see. And this is so, it's so sad. It's because it's kids we're talking about, right? Kids are the most vulnerable, most naive beings out there, and it's really sad that people take advantage of them. It seems to me like I could never understand someone who is a trafficker or who does things like that.
Right.
So I'm not trying to get you to explain someone else's side, but what?
Sure.
Who are doing this trafficking? Who are these people?
Yeah. I can tell you, they're just like there are different factions of trafficking and enslavement, there are different factions of traffickers as well. And let me actually explain that part as a basis level. For instance, in Houston, where I am from, we see this of this variety of trafficking. We see stress clinics, we see spas at every single corner. And I'm sure, you being in Los Angeles, you see the same thing. You see spas, you see massage clinics, you see
they're everywhere.
They're absolutely everywhere. And then there's actual prostitution, which people think, it's prostitution, but it is an actual domestic type of enslavement. And so, there are different factions of that. And then, just also mention in Houston, we also have the cantinas, which in Spanish cantina is bar. And Houston being the geographic location of transport. So we have the Gulf, we have the ship channel. And so a lot of imports, exports go in and out of Houston as a base location. And so with that being said, around that area, workers will, when they're done with their shift, if they're staying in Houston, it's sort of like a gentleman's club, but except they go a step further. They will, transact sex, as a form of entertainment. And so cantinas are bars that are around the ship channel, for instance. And this is how I got started in the advocacy intervention industry. I used to actually go undercover into these cantinas, which are sometimes cartel run. And what happens is, this isn't just an example, women who are brought from Asia or Latin America, women and children, by the way. I witnessed a child myself there.
Inside the
cantinas, yes.
Damn.
And, I witnessed a little girl there being sold for sex. She was just on a bench, and they literally lined them up like cattle or like products, like, here, buy this one, buy that one. And so, they bring these women and children, it could be men as well, and boys, they bring them over, and for the sole purpose of trafficking them out, transacting them out to Johns. So the trafficker is going to be someone different all the time. The trafficker or pimp.
Who's John?
Oh, I'm sorry, John. Good question. That's a really good question. John is... John is slang.
Oh, no, a person called.
No, it's slang. So any man who, or any person who is willing to purchase sex is called a John in law enforcement terms, right, here in the United States. So
thank you.
A person who purchases sex is called a John.
As a name.
A person, yeah. It is. I don't know why. Honestly, I should dig into the origins of why they call it John.
We can do that right now. Wait, why?
Yeah, that would be interesting to find out why it's called a John. So,
dude, ever since we started this podcast, my search history has been very weird.
Very interesting, I'm sure. Yeah. So the trafficker can be anybody. It can be, here in Texas, obviously, you guys know we have a border situation going on. And, the traffickers are most of the times cartel members. The traffickers are, coyotes disguised as parents who bring the children over. I have seen this over and over and over. Literally every single night that I was at the border, this is what I witnessed with my own two eyes. And then the trafficker can also be just a domestic pimp. It could be a rapper. It could be, a family member trafficking out their child. It can look like a lot of different things. So it's a bad problem. I mean, it's a rampant problem, and as pervasive as our culture becomes, the more pervasive that it becomes, the more that this looks more varied as far as who the trafficker could be.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Why do you think this perversion has increased over the years, right? Like, what caused this behavior to increase like tenfold?
You'd imagine it gets squashed, right? You'd imagine
I thought it would,
right. But yeah.
It's the pervasiveness of our culture that just continuously increases. You see, everything ties into each other, and this is by design. Like, the pervasiveness of our culture is by design. Right,
but who designed it?
Marxists and globalists that literally want to tear the family unit apart. And so, there is a bigger agenda, and not to sound so conspiratorial.
Can you please explain yourself?
Honestly,
yes.
Sound as conspiratorial as you want, because I like believe in all that shit. So you can.
Yeah. So, for instance, the population control agenda, it even stems from that. So them knowing that, we can sell sex, and we can sell birth control and abortions and all these things. So have free sex, do whatever you want, like whenever you want. And there's no rules. You can love whoever you want and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's actually a population control, because the true science of reproduction is a man woman sex baby. Like, that's just as simple as that, right?
Simple equation.
And so
millions of years.
And that's just as simple as that. So when you have a culture and society saying you can love whoever you want, and I might be based in saying this, I might be a little controversial in saying this, because this is so against the grain in 2021. it is absolutely an agenda to control the population from having or reproducing, nuclear families. And if you can control the population, you can control your agenda. So with that being
nuclear
said,
families?
that's nuclear family being the man, woman, and the children,
Right.
versus nowadays it's like, love who you want. You can be a pony, you can be a you can be a this or that, you can have whatever gender you want, and it sounds funny, but literally like that is
I know it's funny because like over here, if you try that shit, you'll get your ass whooped, but over there it's like normal to be fluid or whatever, the like burnt chicken nugget or whatever you guys are into right now.
Right, exactly. And other Ali will know this, being in Los Angeles and probably witnessing, as much pervasiveness. It is a very dark time in our society where, anything goes. And, when you are sexually perverted and this society is predicated to believe that, porn is okay and all this. And even that is also controversial because it's like, there's a lot of psychological things that porn does. For instance, that's just another example to the brain, to mold it to believe that like, this is how your endorphins travel. This is how your endorphins make you feel good. And so when you keep setting the bar higher and higher and higher for your endorphins to give you that, for that dopamine to hit your motor functions, then you keep setting the bar higher on how you get pleasured. And see, that's another scientific thing, with the brain. It's like, so when men in our society, and unfortunately, this is just, it just is so pervasive that young men are being brought up to believe that this is normalized, this is okay. And really, they're really doing a lot of damage to their brain because that's not a normal sexual experience and that's not a normal sexual relationship. And so when they expect this new level of sexual pleasure, like they're going to keep upping their fantasies or raising the bar. And so it can be a sexual addiction where they buy prostitutes, where they buy children. And it's like, when you raise the bar, us in our normal way of thinking, it's like, oh yeah, a sexual fantasy, or sexual partner. But you never know what's going on in someone's head where they're like, oh, a kid, something different, and so
to alleviate the limits, the natural limits that the moral natural right limits that we have in terms of intercourse, right, where it pushes the boundaries when boundaries shouldn't be pushed, and this leads to what you're saying right now. Exactly.
And so it's a big problem, and it continues, and you see this even down in the schools, and like what I say is, it is literally all interconnected, because now you see things like, for instance, I saw it just years ago with Teen Vogue. Teen Vogue is a version of Vogue magazine, but aimed for a target audience of it used to be when I was a tween or a teen, like I was reading Teen Vogue at 11 years old. So it wasn't as bad. You would get like lip gloss suggestions, or like how to talk to your crush, but now it's like how to have anal sex, how to, like literally there is a article on Teen Vogue, how to have anal sex, how to do all these things. And it's like, it's that pervasive, where they are trying to shove that down the throats of children.
Right. Okay. It's not right. So we've said a lot of stuff, right? I'm sure most of the audience are probably, if not maybe a bit less, because I get lost very easily. I get too distracted. But there's a lot of different, it's like a spider web, right? So help me, someone who gets lost easily, just put it all into track so we can understand why the fuck slavery is still technically a thing, right? So it starts with pushing the boundaries of what people think intercourse should be, right?
Sure.
That pushes people to try it out in real life, and it makes them, here's where I got lost a little bit. That's like, where does this connect?
Yes, it's like the boundaries always get pushed. And so if you create, like, for instance, if you raise the bar for yourself on something, it's like your, how do I say it? Your capacity keeps expanding. I'll put it this way. When your brain like for instance, when you're creating these new ways for dopamine or for dopamine to travel through your neural pathways in your brain, it's like pathways. It's like it travels to make a pleasurable. It hits a pleasurable piece of your brain. So this is when dopamine travels, which is a hormone that makes you feel good. So when you say "I love you" to the person you love, or when you are, you're having a very loving experience, or you're having fun with your friends, you're getting dopamine. And addicts at the same time, like the drug addicts, they have a dopamine. They also have a dopamine, but they have their sources through drugs. So it's a satisfactory hormone. Right. Now, when you are sending this hormone to your pleasure center in your brain, you keep doing it through sexual fantasies or through purchasing, a prostitute or a child to have sex with. You're creating these pathways, you're creating these little things where it's like you
get desensitized to what should be normal and right, and pleasurable, but that becomes
it becomes your new normal. It becomes your new normal, and when your new normal gets boring, you look for other ways to look for other ways to pleasure yourself, or to get pleasure. And I'm speaking in third party, by the way, but that is the pervasive, sick society that we're living in now. The reason why trafficking occurs or why it exists is because there is a dollar tied to it. It is a right now reported, and I believe it is a way more than that, but right now it's reported $150 billion industry in the world. Again, that's just what's reported. That's what's estimated. But I in my heart and what I observe, I believe it's much more than $150.
That's a lot of money. Why do you think it's? Why do you like who are doing these money transactions? Who's receiving the money? Who's sending the money?
I feel like it would be mostly people that can afford a human life, right? Because it's like I can't probably afford that shit. Ali, I know you like probably can't afford it too, right? So who can afford to buy a human being?
To buy a human, actually, this occurs at different levels, like I stated. So, for instance, when you go to, for instance, there's massage spas all through Houston. I'm sure there's massage spas all through LA. You can literally get a sexual transaction for probably about $50, the purchase price of a massage. And, it can get a lot lower because right now the supply, unfortunately, becomes so much more nefariously bigger. And so when you have more supply, the you can charge a little less. And the reason why it's such a booming profiting dark industry for traffickers is because if you think about drug pushers or you think about drug trafficking, you get the usage of a drug and that's it. It's disposable, it's used, it's disposed. But when you have a person who is a product, you can use them over and over and over and over again. Right. And as you can imagine, and speaking of that person then becomes disposable eventually as well, because either diseases catch on or, depending on the type of trafficker, if they are violent or they are murderers, that they can easily just say, well, you're no use to me, so be gone. And it's that, and that is how dark the industry can.
They don't just run away.
So a lot when it comes to the psychological factor, the psychological bondage of a sex trafficked victim, they get fear-based coerced, and that's a breaking process within being enslaved. And so what happens is, I'll just give you an example of domestic pimping, for instance, which is trafficking. Domestic pimps, what they'll do is they will, for instance, it can be any girl who has a low self-esteem, and they know what to look for. They know how to look for low self-esteem aspects in a person, in a girl. And what they'll do is they'll send a Romeo pimp to ensorcel her so that like I want to provide for you, I want to love you, and these are girls who probably come from broken families, abusive parents, sexually abusive parents, or parents that don't have any money and can't feed them, broken families, so when you have a Romeo pimp say, hey, I want to take care of you, I love you, I want to buy you gifts, I want to take you to dinner, of course a girl who comes from a broken background is going to say, yeah, like, oh my gosh, like finally my life turns around. And then what happens is that Romeo pimp will flip and say, okay, well, if you love me, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go service yourself so that way we can get ahead. So that way we can afford a lifestyle. And so that's just one example how they get entrapped. And so what happens next after that phase, after they get entrapped in, sexual servitude, then most of the time they have what's called a breaking process. This can be either physical, psychological, or both. And what happens is they abuse them psychologically. They say the worst things about them. They can break them physically, beat them. And then comes the fear-based coercion. If you ever try to run away, I will kill your mother, or I will kill your daughter. Some of these, sex workers have children. I will kill your daughter. I will kill your like they will go off the end to make them fearful for their lives. So psychologically, they're bonded. They may not be chained up physically, but they are psychologically bonded to their abuser. And so that's why a lot of times you don't see these prostitutes or sex traffic victims run away, because they're fearful.
Wow, this
is heavy shit. Like this is
making me sad.
Very hard to hear.
Heavy. Yeah. How do you deal with it? I mean, how do you keep researching this? The thing with conspiracy theories and all this darkness is that you learn about them and it's just so dark. Do you have an optimistic view, or?
Honestly, like, I'll be honest with you, it's probably the desensitization, because I can't say it, you guys know what I'm trying to say.
Desensitization.
I'm desensitized to it because I see it. Yes. I see it so much. Probably not so much physically, because I don't physically go see this every single day, although I do see it often. But seeing headline after headline after headline after headline, seeing the same things, but also I am, I have a Christian, background. So I do pray about it, or, maybe this is a purpose that makes me strong and thick skinned about it. But you have, in order to be in the industry of giving knowledge about this, you have to be strong enough to, deal out this information. And for some reason, it does hit me sometimes. Like when I saw it physically, I think it was like last week or the week before last, I was at the border and there were cartel, like I was literally in front of the cartel when they were, going back and forth. I have a video of this on my Instagram. There was a girl who was with a 70-something-year-old man, and the look, just lost look, the empty look in this little girl's eyes, like she was just absolutely devastated. That part broke my heart. I wanted to steal her. I wanted to grab her by the arm and take her home with me. Unfortunately, in such a dark and twisted world right now with the laws, that doesn't permit me to do that. And the officials that were around wouldn't permit me to do that. But it's like little scenarios like that where you actually can feel the soul of a kid, being so devastated and depressed, and being with someone who is not their actual parent, and you have no idea where they're going to end up. That's like the most lost, desperate feeling that you can't do anything about. And it's unfortunate, but sometimes it does hit me, and it's like little cases like that. But for the most part, I'm desensitized because I see it so much.
Right. And I mean,
I found the video, but I'm not sure if we can show this on.
You can go check out Natalie's page to find out more.
We will leave a link in the description below to any of the videos or anything she's mentioned from here on out. Sure. If you want to go check it out yourselves, do. But I have found the video, and I'm looking at the picture of this girl now, and it's just I don't know what to say.
And you said the law is handling that situation? And are they?
It's absolutely not. It's not because the recently, for instance, the DHS department, they went against the Supreme Court order to the Trump's remain in Mexico policy, which kind of prevents so much inflow of migrants. The DHS department, obviously, with them saying we don't agree with that, they're wanting to aid and abet the influx of migrants. And there's a lot of reasons why that's bad, because we're not vetting these migrants. We're not vetting who's coming into this country in the United States. And so just anybody can come in with a child, anybody can come in, who has a sexual predation past. And so I'm sorry, I think I forgot your question in the midst of that. What was that?
The law.
The law.
Are they doing the job?
Yes,
they're supposed to be doing. Are they trying to fight this?
Absolutely. Under this administration, under this president administration, they are absolutely not. They're aiding and abetting the influx of this happening.
That's so horrible.
And it is absolutely horrible. And what's crazy, like the most ironic part about all of this is that, if you put it in perspective, you're taking a step back. We as Americans are being pressured to go along with these guidelines and do this and that, you know what I mean? But then you have an influx at the border where it has absolutely no limitation or parameter or vetting or anything. And a lot of these people come in sick. And so with that being said, like, it's like so ironic that we're being, like, as citizens, we're being reprimanded for the things of our law, but then we're allowing people from foreign nations who are not vetted to come in here and do whatever they want. That's crazy. So with that being said, they can do whatever they want, if it's a black market.
If there's a list of problems, I think, in the world, I think child trafficking is on top of it, and that's the number one thing people should try to
tackle.
Absolutely.
Stop. Yeah. Why
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
Because of the powers that be, they aid and abet it. They are absolutely for it. It is a money-making industry. It is an absolutely atrocious industry at that as well. I'm only talking about the sexual servitude side of the industry. I haven't even talked about the organ harvesting part of the industry, where the carnage part of the industry, where these carnage being that there are some really sick, dark people who have this, how I said, like, people are always upping the bar when they have this sexual, they have this sexual appetite. There are sick pedophiles out there that are nefarious and malicious enough to have a sexual gratification fetish where they actually abuse the child or kill the child. That is also an industry that doesn't get talked about. If you guys, the last time I saw it, it was on YouTube. There's a documentary called Eyes of the Devil. And I would absolutely, this is hard. This documentary was hard for me to watch, and I'm desensitized to this stuff, but it put a fire under my ass to continue doing what I do, because this documentarian, basically what he does is he talks to traffickers in Europe. This is a more Europe-based documentary, but it carries
Patrick
over.
Vega, is that him?
What is it?
Patrick Vega. Here, let me just share screen. So
yes, that sounds about right.
Is this it? The first one?
That's it. Yep, cool. Yep, that's it.
Yeah,
that's the one.
Mm-hmm.
In that documentary, later on in the documentary, they talk about the very specific tactics in which these children are stolen or sold by mothers who do not want them. And they get, it's very graphic. I'm just going to say the things that he says about what happens to these children is very graphic. But the thing that I picked up from the conversation was that he said these are very organized, very sterile places, like torture chambers that are very well organized. With that being said, this is a very well organized thing that is happening underground, and it gets kept under wraps. And in order for it to be kept under wraps like that, it's going to take a lot of money. And so elites or people who are very heavily pocketed, they aid and abet this type of thing.
Right. You said a very important term that I would like to just touch up on because it doesn't make sense to me. Mothers who don't want their children. Like how does that work?
So if mothers, for instance, if they are well into their term of their pregnancy, and it would. In this documentary, they gave a very specific example of a mother who was well into term with her pregnancy, and instead of she didn't know I guess she didn't know she was pregnant, or she came to a decision point where in her pregnancy, because it was already late term, where a trafficker who basically was, like I said, Romeo, he was like a Romeo trafficker. He was like, hey, if you don't want your baby, you can make a lot of money off of it. I would have it and give it to me, and you'll be without a baby. You don't have a problem anymore. But you don't have to worry about it. But really what happens, and she knows what's going to happen to the baby. She knows where these babies or these children end up. And that was actually a part of the documentary where they actually showcased her psyche, like how transparent she was worried about this thing. She was like, this is going to really mess with me for the rest of my life. And, unfortunately, that does happen. And it could be young women, too. It could be young women who just fall into it. So yeah, that actually happens, where mothers who just get desensitized and they sell their children.
I mean, naturally, when a woman has a child, right, there's an automatic attachment to that child, right? It's like we studied this in college about how maternal hormones kick in as soon as that kid comes out. The uterus, it's like it's just a connection, unexplainable, right? So what kind of situation must these women be in to the point where they sever that bond, right? It's just, I can't wrap my head around. I just don't understand, man.
Yeah.
Money is just this tangible material thing that we print every single day, right? This is a human
I guess we could also pose that same question and argument with the subject of abortion, right? Like, I know that is a very controversial subject, very controversial thing to talk about, but it's the same thing. How could a mother, how can you think like this is okay to just rid your child and think of that it's just a clump of cells? Like, you're tied to that thing, you're tied to it.
I'll be very honest, I usually don't like to do this on the show, but I'd rather you have the abortion than to have your kid end up in one of these stupid bullshit situations of torture and trafficking, and you know what I mean? Like, kill me rather than humiliate and torture me. That's my to say. That's my mentality. I'd rather die than be tortured than
I mean,
all that shit.
The argument could still be posed within the tactics of abortion as well, because they also pick apart the child within the womb. And, although you can't hear the screams or the hurt and the pain that the child will go through, it's the same. Unfortunately, it's the same thing. It's just in the womb. So, I get it. There are arguments that sound like they make sense, when it comes to the safety or the well-being appearance of the child being outside the womb. But unfortunately, it is a double-edged sword upon that topic. And unfortunately, there's not an easy answer to it. I think, of course, both things, in my opinion, are wrong. But
if we're speaking facts, I mean, you might as well do, if you're a woman who's pregnant and want to have an abortion, 120 days before the child develops its nerves, just saying, right? Like, at least that's the most humane way to do it. No, if the child can't feel, right, then might as well. It would be painless for both you but if you have around 2.5 to 3 months and you still can't decide, and then 9 months in you're like, oh, I kind of don't want to You should have planned this before you even had the child, right?
And don't even sell. Yeah, I mean, selling your child to slavery.
Look,
and we didn't even talk about organ harvesting. I do want to. I'm curious to know, Natalie, who are these people that are buying these organs? I mean, I don't know where to buy an organ.
Right. So, there's a lot of different reasons why anybody would buy organs. And, of course, there's a black market for it. Somebody could buy organs for, for instance, a beauty or, how did I say, like Newsweek did an article on this where they use young blood and all that. So it sounds conspiratorial, but they actually do utilize these little aspects of anatomy, young people anatomy, in order to keep themselves younger. There is a science to it. And Newsweek actually admitted it. They're like, hey, and spas do blood facials all the time. So it's like, this stuff is very real. When it comes to organ harvesting, again, there's also a black market for it. When it comes to like, for instance, in the very specific example they give in this documentary, there's a double whammy where they, I'm sorry, this is going to sound graphic, but they rape and torture the child to death. And then this is in a sterile room that the purchaser does this in, and then there's a very specific a skilled person who goes in to collect all the organs of the dismembered child. And so there are various reasons for the sale of these organs. Unfortunately it's a very sick world, and the dark web does exist. A lot of people don't know about the dark web, but that's where a lot of illicit and illegal activity, illegal transactions occur, including trafficking and organ harvesting.
I mean, like with organ harvesting, I don't know if makes sense is the right words to use here, but I can kind of see why it is a huge thing in the underground world, per se, mainly because like people who need transplant usually are desperate because the waiting list is huge. So because like here, well, not necessarily here, but in this part of the world, they go to places like India or like Pakistan or Afghanistan, or these very low income third world. I'm trying to not say anything wrong. I'm trying to be very where they go and they buy like a kidney, right? Or part of a liver, because liver can grow back to its original size. Kidney, you have two, you can function on one. You know what I mean? Lung, you have two, you can function on one. But like to fully rape and dismember a child just to harvest it, that's just like, I thought the shit we're doing here is like fucked up. Then I hear this and I'm just...
It is what it sounds like. It is absolutely an atrocious industry. I mean, and you'll never hear about it because, and that's why I started one of my platforms, The Daily Traffic, where I give the headlines day to day of like who is arrested, who is buying, who is out soliciting children to have sex with, like, because you want to see it at a consistent scale to know that this is a very pervasive problem. Unfortunately, because the organ harvesting industry is just so under wraps and it is just so protected by the elite, you're not going to hear about it because they have a very specific system, underground system, in which they perform this and they do this under wraps. So we won't hear about it, unfortunately, unless there is like just some big revelation or big,
Epstein case where one of the elites fuck up and lo and behold, we get to know everything, right? I've heard a while ago about this closet company that used to, every time a child would go missing, they name a new brand of closet after the name of the child that went missing. And there was this huge conspiracy that they would sell the child inside the closet or something to that. I'm not sure how that goes. So can you...
Yeah. So you're talking about the Wayfair, I guess conspiracy. Now, the one part that I didn't really, I don't agree with, or I don't see where it has relevance is the missing child to the furniture piece. It could be just a coincidence. However, what I will say is that there's something going on. I mean, there's something going on with them pricing. For instance, actually, one of my followers sent me a DM and they sent me a Walmart link to a ballet shoe, a kid's ballet shoe that's $5,000. And you can't choose a size. You can't choose a variety or
Yeah.
Yes. And people still find things on Wayfair that are like atrociously or outrageously priced, and it makes absolutely no sense. Now, is it trafficking? It could be. It could be that, or it could be some sort of money laundering of some sort, and that's what I always thought. But it is kind of weird to have like baby pieces and baby clothes like priced in the tens of thousands of dollars.
It's wrong,
and just not have an explanation for
whatever
it.
It implies, without an explanation, whatever it implies is not great. I mean, Natalie, we're kind of wrapping up on time here, but I do want to ask, do you have I know you're reporting on all these incidents, but do you have any ideas of like a solution? Have you thought of what could possibly happen to make this stop? Because I'm in the fight with you. It's so wrong what's happening. Me and Ali I hate this personally, what's happening. And
I'm still trying to like realize what the fuck you just said today, because it's just a lot to take in, right? Like I'm literally in the parts of the world where I believe this shit doesn't exist. Probably does, and I don't know. Probably doesn't. I can't really say, but it's just
it's a lot. It's a lot to process.
It is.
What can we do? We can firstly become aware of what is happening and be vocal about it. Be vocal that this is wrong. Be vocal that it's not okay to force this agenda down our society, especially the children. I think one thing I didn't say, just kind of within the wrap up of what I was talking about. The agenda against children is stacked up really high. Like the indoctrination of trying to sexualize children so early, the school indoctrination. Now you see a lot more parents at these school board meetings. I mean, I've never seen this. I don't know about you guys. You probably are my age as well. But in the United States, I have never seen this many parents at the school board meetings protesting the indoctrination of their children, because what's happening is they're trying to force this agenda onto children to openly sexual, like, you can love whoever you want. This is how you have sex, to like fifth graders or second graders. And it is insane. It is insanity. They are grooming these children to believe that sex is a normal thing. And that is very dangerous.
But it's still grooming, but like, why does a second grader need to know this kind of stuff? Right? Like,
exactly.
When I was in school, I was worried about what was for lunch and where my toys were at. That's the worst that I had to deal with. But I have to think of like it's just
Right. And so if the priority is on sexualizing these children and an open season agenda on, indoctrinating them sexually, when they should be learning how to write their name, or they should be learning how to sound syllables out, like that doesn't make sense. Right. So why is it such a priority that they learn openly about the pervasive sexual nature of the mainstream? That doesn't make any sense. So with that being said, we have to nit it at the bud. We have to be vocal. We have to protest and say this is not right. And then, ultimately for trafficking, to combat it, look to the ministries that are actually rehabilitating sex trafficking survivors. That's like one of my big advocacies is these anti-sex trafficking ministries, like who have been on the front lines for years. I worked with sex trafficking ministries, anti-sex trafficking ministries years ago. They were the first to know about this, the first to help it. And they're the ones that are on the front lines, rehabilitating survivors, rescuing them. So fund them, what they need in order to attack the problem. And that's how we start. We bring attention by putting our wallets or putting our efforts where it's needed. And so, be vocal, learn about it, as well as advocate with these organizations and ministries that are actually on the front lines, in direct contact with the survivors or the victims.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Natalie. I really appreciate your time.
Honestly, that's just wall. Yes, you guys watch another episode of A to the Show. If you watch this episode, right, or if you were able to fully take in everything, if you guys enjoyed this episode or learned anything half as much as we did, please like, subscribe, share. We will leave a link to Natalie's stuff in the description below, social media, all the stuff we talked about today. You can find it there. Nat, anything you'd like to shout out or let the world know?
If you want to follow me, my name is pretty unique, Natly Denise, Natalie Denise, on every single platform, but especially join me on Telegram. It's Natalie Denise. We just never know with what's going on in the world. So thank you guys for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Sure.
Keep the fight going. Honestly, you have our support.
You have our support.
Thank you so much, Ali Squared.
Peace, love, happiness. We'll see you.
Alrighty. Bye.